Lots to get through. We'll start, though, at Manchester United, who are very close to appointing a new interim head coach. Live to Daniel Kahn, who's at Old Trafford for us. Dan, Michael Carrick is the chosen one for now, it appears.
Yeah, afternoon, Will. We're just edging ever closer to that official confirmation that Michael Carrick will take over as interim head coach until the end of the season at Manchester United. We reported earlier today that they've reached a verbal agreement between the club and Carrick for a return for Carrick, really, especially after 12 years at the club as a midfielder, of course. He then became a coach under Jose Mourinho, then joined the backroom staff under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. He had 3 games as an interim after that, but now he will have 17 games in the league to lead this team to compete really for a Champions League place. Now, we saw him arrive at Carrington a bit earlier this morning. He was followed by Director of Football Jason Wilcox as well, really to just finalise contract details and finish all of those finer bits before we get that official confirmation. But we're also getting other details as well, what his backroom staff could potentially look like. And again, reported a bit earlier today that he is expected to name the former England assistant coach Steve Holland as his number 2, which seems quite astute. Of course, Steve Holland, so much experience, especially with England. He helped lead that team alongside Sir Gareth Southgate to 2 finals. He's also seen as very much the tactician, the hands-on coach as part of that England setup, and he'll know quite a few of these players, the likes of Harry Maguire, Luke Shaw, Kobbie Mainoo as well, who has really struggled this season, especially under Ruben Amorim. Carrick himself will also be joined by the likes of former Middlesbrough assistant Jonathan Woodgate, the current under-21s coach Travis Binion, and former teammate Johnny Evans. Darren Fletcher, who was in interim charge last week, he's expected to go back to the under-18s and continue his own coaching journey on that side of things. But look, we're edging ever closer to this official confirmation. Carrick, at this moment in time, is expected to take charge of training tomorrow once we do get that announcement, all building up to Saturday's huge game against Manchester City. And then it's also the week after. Easy for Carrick, isn't it?
Dan, thank you very much. This is what we need, Jamie, this lunchtime, some French fuel, a French fuel injection. And here is Julien Laurent for everyone watching.
Build up. You better be good.
I know. Jules, great to have you with us. So, look, picking up on Michael Carrick, what is success for him at Old Trafford in these, let's face it, there can be no more than 17 games?
It has to be a top 5 finish, really, and I think we talked about it a little bit last week as well. This is a Premier League season where even if United are maybe not good enough to be usually in the top 5 and qualify for the Champions League, this is the year where it's so tight between 4th and 14th that they have to. And that's all he has to think about is, even they're not in the FA Cup anymore, but just focus on that league form. They have to finish up. It's a great opportunity for them to actually get Champions League football, which was not a given at the start of the season. But because the likes of Newcastle and Spurs and all those big clubs are just having an average season so far, it's a great chance for United to actually get that top 5, which, again, will be a great achievement considering where they were at the start of the season. The last season they had, changing managers halfway through. And I think if they can get top 5, it will be a good job done for Carrick.
The big question, Jamie, is if he does well, which you assume a man of his character and what he did originally at Middlesbrough, certainly in the first year there, if he does succeed and, as Jules says, gets a top 5 finish, maybe even top 4, who knows, maybe even top 3, that really would put the cat amongst the pigeons. Will he be a serious contender for the long-term gig?
The clamour factor amongst the Manchester United fans. They've had their fingers burned before, obviously, by doing that with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, even though he will point to the fact that they finished, runner-up, didn't they, under Solskjaer? So, you look at where Manchester United are, arguably he was one of the most successful managers in recent years. I think we're seeing this trend more and more often, aren't we, of these sort of custodians, these safe pair of hands coming in who, quote-unquote, know the club and can kind of see them through to the end of the season. And I think that is obviously what Michael Carrick is being brought in for, and there are going to be big names available after the World Cup, the likes of Nagelsmann and Carlo Ancelotti, Mauricio Pochettino, Thomas Tuchel, perhaps. The question is, Julien, are Manchester United even that attractive a prospect to those big name managers anymore? Because, we're all much of a muchness in terms of our age. We grew up with Manchester United winning everything. Yeah. Are they Manchester United anymore? Are they still a big lure?
I mean, I'm a bit younger than you two, but I would
say, what's he's doing his
I know, and I just like...
Got your passport down there.
I think if you finish top 5 and there's Champions League for you, it's still Manchester United. There's a new stadium on the way. The training ground has been rebuilt or refurbished, if you want. There's a decent squad there. I think you've got young players who've got more experience. It's not perfect, and you need some work in the summer for sure, but I think it's still a very attractive job. So you'd go for it. And also, if you're the one to turn United around and get it back to the best, then you become a hero, absolute hero. So it could be tricky. I think you go for it. With Carrick, I think you can say to him, listen, if you do well, if you finish top 5, because I think 5th place would take you to the Champions League, then you will part of the conversation. We will consider you to be the permanent manager, but you can't guarantee anything. A bit like what they did with Solskjaer, because that was clearly a mistake.
The other thing is, I remember chatting to Kasper Schmeichel a couple of years ago, who had been at Nice, and he said to me off camera, by the way, Jim Ratcliffe, everything he touches turns to gold. It might take a bit of time, but he will turn Manchester United around. And look, the early signs haven't been great from that point of view, but there clearly is something there, and you know how he turned things around at Nice.
Let that be a message to you footballers watching. There are no secrets when you tell Jamie.
Clearly,
It wasn't off
record now.
It wasn't off the record.
So what would be the perfect fit long term for Manchester United? And look, give me names, because earlier in the day, Jamie, threw out the name Carlo Ancelotti after the World Cup, Thomas Tuchel, and we know the ones that are already managing in the Premier League. Oliver Glasner, of course, Antonio Areola might be of interest, Marco Silva, who's out of contract as well. But out of those names and on further shores, who is the perfect fit for them in the structure that they have?
I think it's a bit tricky in the sense that I think they've tried the young, upcoming Amorim type, or the ones who did well abroad, like the Ten Hags. For me now, you could try Iraola and he might do really well, but it could be like an Unai Emery Arsenal, where the step up from Bournemouth to United with that pressure, with the fact that it's a United team that would need a lot of work on, might be too much for him. We don't know
what
that.
We're seeing with Thomas Frank.
Yeah, exactly. Or Thomas Frank at Spurs, exactly the same. Whereas I think if you go and get Thomas Tuchel, for example, who's obviously done it with the biggest club, whether that was in Paris or in Germany, at Chelsea, the Champions League, anything you want, I think there's a bit more guarantees there. And I also think you need somebody, not just with the experience, but with the personality to go with it and the character, because this is one of the biggest clubs in the world.
With all the noise about, with all the noise about the managerial appointment, the head coach appointment, with Michael Carrick, with the interim, with the long-term successor, we're not talking about transfers, are we, with Manchester United? And we potentially should be, because of the way that they sign players within the structure of Christopher Vavell, who's the head of recruitment, Jason Wilcox and Omar Barada. Marcus Llorente is doing the rounds in the Spanish newspapers. Could you see that as a possibility for Manchester United?
I think he's done really well at Atletico in a very versatile role. You can play a right back, you can play a right midfielder. He's a very reliable player, there's no doubt. I would be a little bit surprised for Atleti to let him go, to be fair. But if there's a chance there for United, and again, United have to be careful, because we saw with the Casemiro deal, for example, a 5-year deal, when you are in your late 20s or early 30s, is a bit crazy at times, especially with the kind of money they threw at Casemiro, who's not doing bad this season, but we know what happened since he signed for United. So I think that has to be taken in consideration. They need a mix of the squad with youth and experience, with players who've done in the Premier League before, others that can come from abroad, no problem. And I guess Llorente has the right mentality, but I would be quite cautious with those kind of moves.
So Marcus Llorente, current.
But we're going to start with Manchester United as we await confirmation that Michael Carrick has been appointed interim head coach until the end of the season. Let's head to Old Trafford right now. Join our football correspondent Rob Dawson and our reporter Danielle Khan. They're both right across this story for us. Gents, good afternoon. What is the latest?
Well, it feels like a big day for Manchester United, doesn't it? Even though it's only an appointment until the end of the season, of course. It's one that we've been talking about incessantly ever since Ruben Amorim was sacked last week. And what we know, and what we've told you on Sky Sports News this morning, is that everything is now agreed between Michael Carrick and Manchester United's hierarchy regarding that contract to keep him in charge until the end of the season, and the details of his backroom staff that we'll talk about in just a moment. But in terms of timescales and what happens from here, well, I understand the talks between Carrick and United's bosses went late into the night last night. Until about 11 o'clock was when they wrapped things up. But at that point, I think there was confidence on both sides that the deal was pretty much done. The contracts are now now in the hands of the lawyers, those final legal details to be done. And then at some point, possibly even today, we'd expect Manchester United to make that announcement that Michael Carrick is the new man in charge, the new head coach of Manchester United. Key issue, though, has been the backroom staff. And Dan, you've been right across the backroom staff.
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. And I imagine a lot of those conversations late last night would have included what would be the makeup of Michael Carrick's backroom staff. And we know some of those expected to really be part of that. And one of those is Jonathan Woodgate, his former England teammate, also his assistant during his few years at Middlesbrough, also former, I guess we say former now, but under-21s coach Travis Binion, who helped support Darren Fletcher. He's really led the 21s this season and they've done incredibly well. Also Johnny Evans, who returned to the club, again supporting Darren Fletcher in his role. He returned to the club for, I suppose, the third time, twice as a player and now as a coach. But I think perhaps the biggest name of Carrick's appointment, backroom staff, is Steve Holland, of course, the former England assistant coach. And he's someone, Rob, you know incredibly well.
I do know him very well. He's very, very good on the training field. He's an excellent coach, very good tactically. And I think when we brought that news to you on Sky Sports News, I think a lot of Manchester United fans went, well, OK, that starts to get a feel of a pretty good coaching and management structure there. In terms of the experience and the people that are going to come in and support Michael Carrick. And I think you and I have been talking an awful lot today about why Michael Carrick. I think a lot of United fans are asking, why Michael Carrick? Why did he get the nod ahead of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, ahead of Ruud van Nistelrooy? And it's been made clear to me that there are a number of issues. Firstly, United wanted to appoint somebody who knew the club very, very well. They needed somebody that could hit the ground running, who wasn't going to be overawed by the size of this job. And I think some of the United bosses felt that Ruben Amorim, despite the fact that he was here for as long as he was, 14 months or whatever, still felt that the club was a huge job and was surprised by that. I think it's also key that Carrick's prepared to work within that structure, work with Jason Wilcox, the director of football, who has a big influence here, and we'll talk to him an awful lot about tactics and how the team wants to play. It's pretty clear that Carrick didn't want a deal beyond the end of this season, or wasn't pushing for a deal beyond the end of this season, whereas there was a suggestion that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer had said, look, if I get you Champions League football, I'd like this deal to be made more substantive. And I think they're impressed by his tactical plan as well. And we saw some of that with the job that Michael Carrick did at Middlesbrough.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think at Middlesbrough, he showed kind of what he wants his team to look like. Out of possession, 4-2-3-1. But as they go forward, it turns into a more 3-2-5, with really trying to dominate that back line with attacking players. Now, how that applies to this United team, the good news is they'll get the likes of Brian Mbeumo and Amad Diallo back for the Manchester derby. But I think the key thing about Michael Carrick and the backroom staff that he's appointed is they will be familiar with some of these players. Harry Maguire, Bruno Fernandes, especially Steve Holland will know Kobbie Mainoo, who's really struggled this season under his predecessor Ruben Amorim. So look, I don't also think it's a secret that perhaps under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, I think there's a big question, and there's also pressure on the hierarchy to get this appointment right. You wonder, with Solskjaer appointing someone part of the previous regime, would that have been his forward thinking potentially? I wonder if that would have been in their thinking a little bit, whereas with Michael Carrick very much developing as a coach, he only had the 3 games in charge last time once Solskjaer was sacked. So very interesting in that sense. In terms of the timescale though, Rob, of course, Carrick in charge until the end of the season, but is this all with the vision of a big name appointment in the summer?
That's exactly what this is about. And look, I know there are United fans who are critical of the club and critical of Ineos for the fact that they haven't gone out and got the big name, the big new manager now. And my understanding is, and I know, Dan, you've had similar conversations as well, is that United are absolutely convinced that there will be a better calibre and a better pool of managers available, head coaches available in the summer. And that's an interesting debate, by the way, head coach or manager, because, of course, the likes of Thomas Tuchel, Julian Nagelsmann, perhaps even Luis Enrique will be available in the summer. We know that Marco Silva, Indoni Areola, and those sorts of managers will be available in the summer as well. Oliver Glasner, of course, whose contract expires with Crystal Palace as well. And so whilst those aren't necessarily going to be on Manchester United's shortlist right now, and we can't say that, they thought, the United's bosses, it was a silly mistake to make to rule those managers out and pick from a much smaller pool now. Of course, though, Dan, the point is here that United's season is not dead. We know that they're out of both cup competitions. We know that they've only got the Premier League to focus on. But with a huge game to come on Saturday, there's still very much the prospects of Champions League or Europa League football for United to chase.
Yeah, absolutely, Robin. I mean, I've been at Old Trafford so many times in the last month talking about how United were 5th. They were within points of a Champions League place and they weren't able to capitalise on those opportunities. Draws in the last month against likes of West Ham, Wolves, Burnley especially have meant that they're now 7th. And actually, although they're competing for this Champions League place, and that's what Darren Fletcher said in his last news conference, the players now need to step up. That is what they need to do, but they also need to make sure they don't slip. Remember, this is a team that finished 15th last season. But anyway, for now, let's focus on the here and now. Michael Carrick expected to be announced a bit later today, I think, if everything goes well, and maybe looking to take training tomorrow for the first time after the players were given a few days off, all in preparation for the big Manchester derby on Saturday lunchtime.
Live on Sky, of course, and by then hopefully they'll have finished the roadworks around here, so it's a bit quieter when we start talking to you.
Oh, what a game as well. Guys, top work as ever. Thank you very, very much. Right, for more on this now, we can cross to the former Arsenal and England striker Alan Smith and talk about that and a whole host of other things. Alan, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, mate. Very well.
Great to hear. And I tell you what, we've had a lot to talk about, haven't we, at the start of this year? And we've got another massive story which is about to happen, and that is, Carrick becoming the interim head coach of Manchester United, which we expect to be confirmed hopefully later today, maybe even tomorrow. Before I ask you about Carrick, just the idea of Man United appointing an interim till the end of the season, what do you think about that? Or should they have perhaps really tried to have appointed a permanent manager at this stage?
Well, the ideal scenario would be to get a permanent man in, wouldn't it? That's pretty plain. But as the boys said, you get a lot more options, choices in the summer. It always happens that way, and particularly after a World Cup as well. You've got this period where you're treading water a little bit, but they'll be hoping to tread it quite well and get in the Champions League, and then they can obviously attract a better quality of manager, you would imagine, if they are in Europe's top tier competition, if they are back in the Champions League. I think it was the only way forward, in all fairness to the United owners at the moment.
And they had options for interim as well, didn't they? So if they do go with Carrick, what do you think would be the thinking behind going with him over the more experienced Ole Gunnar Solskjaer?
Yeah, much would depend on maybe the conversations that both have had with the hierarchy over the last few days. The word was that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer wanted maybe a chance to take over full time if he did well up until the end of this season. Didn't sound like the hierarchy were too keen on that. They didn't see him as a permanent manager. So, listen, Michael Carrick, in some ways, is a diplomatic choice in terms of holding the respect of the fans. He's an ex-United player, one of their legends. But, of course, that doesn't count for much in the dressing room. Those United players won't know who he is as a player, who he has been as a coach. They will only rate him on what he says in that dressing room, the sessions he puts on the training ground, the results that he can get. Players can sniff out a fraud within 10 minutes if the manager doesn't really know what he's talking about. I'm not suggesting Michael doesn't, because I think he is a very talented coach. But, the fact he's an ex-player only takes you so far.
It's quite interesting that we're hearing that Steve Holland will be part of his backroom staff when it gets announced. What do you make of that decision? How important will his experience be?
Yeah, I think it's quite a canny move. Obviously, Steve's been around the block several times in club football. He's been at Chelsea, obviously, another big football club. So he understands the pressures, the expectations. He had this great relationship, of course, with Gareth Southgate. I sometimes thought that their opinions on football were a little bit too similar. I think with a head coach and an assistant, sometimes it's nice to get slightly different views so that one can be challenged by the other. But no, I think it's a good appointment to get somebody in of that experience next to him.
And Carrick's first game is going to be the small matter of a Manchester derby, isn't it? Straight into the fire. What do you think about that then? I mean, is it actually potentially not a bad time to play Man City at home, given their defensive issues at the moment?
Well, yeah, it could be. And I think it's a good game for Michael Carrick. And I think, for the players of Manchester United as well, Old Trafford will be absolutely buzzing. There'll be a special atmosphere in there. And when that's the case, sometimes you can bridge the gap between the two sides. So for Carrick, I don't think he'll be unduly bothered about it. But, and as you said, City drawn the last three, have they? Dropping points, problems at the back defensively. So it might be closer than it otherwise would have, maybe, this time next year or the year before that. But United aren't in great form. Just gone out to Brighton in the FA Cup, of course. They look vulnerable. So it's one of those that's difficult to pick a winner. But you'd certainly put City as favourites going into it.
And then looking ahead to the summer and that permanent appointment that Man United could make, a certain Xabi Alonso is now out of a job. Should they be seriously looking at him despite his Liverpool connections? And if you think about it, and there are going to be so many options, aren't there, in the summer? If you had to sort of pick, 2 or 3 who you would think would be the most likely options to take over permanently for Man United, who would they be?
I mean, it's hard to second-guess the hierarchy because, they've been a bit scattergun up until now in their decision-making. But I think it's right that you need somebody of authority, of standing, somebody who's experienced top-level football, won trophies at the top. So maybe some of those international managers, the boys mentioned Thomas Tuchel. How's he going to feel at the end of the World Cup with England? Who knows? I think Pochettino, might be one to keep a close eye on. He had a big link with United, didn't he, a couple of years back? And I don't think he's going to want to stay with the US national team, for too much longer. So he might be one. He might be one. Luis Enrique as well is a fascinating one. He's been at PSG for a while now, but looks like perhaps that relationship might be coming to an end. And obviously he's a fantastic coach.
And what about Alonso? Should the Liverpool connections matter, or should he be seriously considered?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, how it finished at Real Madrid, I don't know the precise details, but it looked like there was a bit of a standoff. It looked like he struggled to handle the big stars, the big egos, and maybe not to the same extent, those egos at Manchester United, but. Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't see him as one of the favourites, put it that way.
OK, well, let's move on to another head coach who has just taken charge, and that is Leo.
Welcome back to Good Morning Transfers. Manchester United then close to agreeing a deal for Michael Carrick to become their interim head coach. Let's head live to Old Trafford and speak to our reporter, Daniel Kahn. Dan, good morning to you. It's dragging on a little bit. Is this the day that we can expect Carrick to be confirmed?
Yeah, morning, Will. It's edging ever closer to that deal being completed for Michael Carrick to take charge of Manchester United, an interim head coach position until the end of the season. We understood and reported yesterday that he was meeting the hierarchy at the club, including Director of Football Jason Wilcox, tying out those final details, what his contract will look like, confirming he will be in charge until the end of the season, what his backroom staff could look like. My colleague Rob Dawson reporting last night that he'd quite like his former assistant from Middlesbrough and former England teammate Jonathan Woodgate to join his backroom staff at the club as well. So whether he's able to get that agreed with the club, we will wait and see. But in terms of answering your question, United are hopeful, I think, to get this deal done before the end of the day and make sure he is in charge for him to take training for the first time tomorrow when the players return, having had 2 days off, all pre-planned, not as a result of the FA Cup exit on Sunday, but all really building up to what is a huge game on Saturday, a derby against Manchester City. And let's not forget, they play Arsenal the weekend after as well. So a huge few weeks for Manchester United. So much noise off the pitch. It looks like they're getting that sorted now, but with all the eyes now going to be on it in the next few days as well.
Dan, thank you very much. Jeffrey, we're going to talk about Michael Carrick. What do you make of this as a move? Even if it is going to be just until the end of the season, or is it? And how do the likes of Jason Wilcox and Omar Barada deal with this behind the scenes? Are we set for, this is the point I'm trying to get to, another Ole Gunnar Solskjaer moment where actually he overachieves? What's overachieving? There's a million questions here for you to unpack. Say, for example, he finishes in the Champions League spots. He's only a point now, Manchester United, off what will be a Champions League spot, 5th. So if he does that and he gets Manchester United playing the Manchester United way, there'll be a clamour again, won't they? Will they not be in the same sort of boat? And forget then talking about your your Ancelottis and your Glasners and your Iraolas in the summer.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a hard place for the club. You're giving it to Carrick, who has gone out and done well and learned his trade a little bit, you'd say. And you know, personally, I've played against his team at Middlesbrough, and they were flying, and it felt like they'd snuck one or two extra players on. The way he had them playing, it was really, really nice. Obviously, not for me against him, but no, I think he's a good manager, and if he comes in, you know, and does well, overachieve, as you say, there is a shout where ex-players might even be saying, give him the contract, whatever. But I think overachieving or getting into the Champions League spots, it's quite realistic for them. They've nothing in their way now. They're not in any cups. They've got just Saturday to Saturday games, or they've got a week break in between where he can implement what he wants the players to do. And I think he is a good coach. He's had a great career, a good footballer himself. So,
but that insight in terms of a player behind the scenes, what they would be thinking, because equally, I imagine running a business like Manchester United, you can't say to him, by the way, no matter what you do, you're not getting the job next season, because what you know, the players pick up on that. Oh, well, we know he's not going to be the gaffer next year. It's a mess, isn't it? If you work like that.
But then, if you look at it, and he does do well, and they have said that to him, his name is in the hat when it comes to the summer, and he will be up against, say, other managers they're looking at. And
it's a chance for him to put himself in the shop window as well, isn't it? And perhaps be Manchester United manager 2 or 3 managers down the line.
Which is a great opportunity, bearing in mind he was sacked by Middlesbrough in the Championship.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of coming back to the club that he loves so dearly, that it's going to be, the vibes will be like when Van Nistelrooy was there. You know, they're going to love having Michael Carrick back. He's already been a caretaker there, of course, as well. How much power do you think the players have in all of this? I'm just looking at a lot of the papers from this morning. Again, all reports, but apparently a select group of the Manchester United leadership players made it concerned that they didn't want Ole Gunnar Solskjaer back.
Yeah, well, they might have seen Carrick's name floating about and they thought, we've heard good things about him, we want him in. They might have just been asked loosely, how was it the last time Ole was in taking control? So we don't know what they actually said, but I think why not give Carrick a go and see how he does till the end of the season, and then if he does well, it's in the hands of the board and they can say, do you know what, here's another year. They don't have to give out maybe a 4 or 5 year contract to him and then sack him. And I suppose he did get sacked by Middlesbrough, but every manager gets sacked at the end of the day, so I don't think they can let that affect them.
It's increasingly becoming a thing, isn't it, these days, that you know, a club will fire a manager halfway through the season and bring in, quote unquote, a safe pair of hands until the end of the season, and it's invariably somebody who, again, quote unquote, knows the club. So, you know, you look back a few seasons ago, it was Frank Lampard at Chelsea. Now it's Michael Carrick at Manchester United. Martin O'Neill is obviously doing it at Celtic now as well. It's just somebody bringing in who understands the sort of DNA, if you like, of the club, who can just guide them through to the summer. And we know after the World Cup, the likes of Carlo Ancelotti, Thomas Tuchel, probably fresh from winning the World Cup with England, Mauricio Pochettino, they're all going to be on the market, aren't they? So I think a lot of clubs you'll see just try to sort of guide somebody to guide the club through the summer, and then we'll move for a big name then.
And on top of that, you think someone like Carrick, actually, when you look at Chelsea, we don't know how that's, going to pan out with Liam Rosenior there. I think he's a seriously impressive guy, and Chelsea fans should be excited, but he's been in the fabric of the football club with Strasbourg, working for the company. You could argue that with Michael Carrick, right? I'm not saying he's a yes man and a puppet, but he will work within the structure of what they want. He's not going to upset the apple cart. This could be the long-term answer.
Yeah, it could be.
People aren't suggesting.
Yeah, like you said, he knows the club and he probably loves the club. He might still live around the area, so for him it might suit him just to go in, steady the ship. You look at a lot of the ex-players, even Ole saying, doesn't matter what the contract is, I'll go in and help the club. So people are just happy to go in and, you know, try and help United to become a better club again.
Time will tell. We shall see. Right, next we're going to be speaking to a Spanish football expert on why Atletico Madrid have let Conor Gallagher leave, and could Arsenal enter the race to sign Mark Gahey. See you in a bit. To Old Trafford and to speak to Daniel Kahn and some news coming out of Manchester United. Dan, what can you tell us?
A bit of an update for you, Will. Manchester United and Michael Carrick have reached a verbal agreement for him to become the interim head coach until the end of the season, getting ever closer to officially confirming him as interim head coach until the end of the season. Negotiations went on late last night, and we've been told when all the outstanding issues were ironed out, the contractual details are now being finalised by lawyers, and all of those final details. We're expecting Carrick to sign that all-important paperwork and confirm his position as Manchester United's newest interim head coach later this afternoon. Now, we'll bring you those pictures as soon as we can, but we've also just heard that Michael Carrick and Director of Football Jason Wilcox have arrived at Carrington as of 5 or 10 minutes ago. So all of this is heading in that trajectory of Carrick officially being confirmed later on today of their new head coach. And look, both sides are keen to get this done as soon as possible, really. We've been telling you all morning, the players are due back into training tomorrow to prepare for the Manchester derby on Saturday against Manchester City. And look, Carrick also, it's important to say that he will know a lot of this squad. He'll know the likes of Bruno Fernandes, Luke Shaw, Harry Maguire. So it'll be very interesting to see what it's like when he first meets them, again, having left the club 3 years ago, having worked under Jose Mourinho and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. But just to recap that news, Manchester United and Michael Carrick have now reached a verbal agreement for him to take over as an interim head coach until the end of the season.
Dan, thank you very much. So there we go, starting to move the news at Old Trafford, Jeff. And Dan mentioned the next game, the Manchester derby at Old Trafford on Saturday. Guess what's after that? A trip to the Emirates, Arsenal away. I mean, if you're going to get those guys on side, those fans, those doubters, those cynics that perhaps thinks, let's move quicker and faster than someone like Michael Carrick. He actually then plays his old team, Tottenham and West Ham, to come. It's going to be a busy few weeks, but what an opportunity for him.
Yeah, massive. Every game in the Premier League's big, but if he can get the players to, put a good performance in, one that the fans will like, that'll be, his first protocol. And then if he can pick up points out of them games, because I don't think realistically people outside of being United fans, they don't give United a chance to win the next two games. So if he can pick up points, it'll definitely get people on side.
I was just going to say as well, interesting off the back of your chat with Dermot there about Xavi Alonso. He was the hottest young manager in Europe, wasn't he, after what he did at Bayer Leverkusen? Takes a big job at Real Madrid, arguably the biggest club in the world, and it's all gone up in smoke inside 8 months. Who was the hottest European manager before Xavi Alonso? Ruben Amorim. After what he did at Sporting, gets a job at a massive club, and it all goes terribly wrong as well. So perhaps a cautionary tale there. I don't know.
Okay, should we...
Martí, que si no está es por motivos de fuerza mayor, así que todo el ánimo para él, un abrazo grande y veremos si su rayo le puede dar hoy una alegría.
En troncos de Sergio García junto a Verdú, cuando ya se cogen esas cartas secretas. A turno de Aitor Vives, encara Aitor, arriba. Desviado el remate de Aitor Vives, la llega a tocar por Lechuga.
Días en los que quizá podrían haber tenido mejor resultado, los porteros han estado ahí.
Viene el balón para Manu. Precisamente un portero es quien le da el primer gol a troncos. ¡Gol! En la frontal del área decide combinar sobre la figura de Paul Lechuga. Vértice del área, probará con el regate. No, la cambia entera. ¡Qué balón de Lechuga! ¡Para Alegre! ¡Para adentro! ¡Gol! Pues espérate, porque viene Fraile, esta línea de fondo la pone Fraile, el balón para Poc, que recorta delante de Ferres. Poc, ¡qué parada abajo! De Manu Martín, lo hizo de fábula.
Ha señalado cesión.
Libre en directo, eso es.
Sí, libre en
Ojo
directo,
que la pone rápido en movimiento, los troncos para adentro. Sergio, ¡gol! Vamos al penalti, presidente. Lo tirará en paralelo a la portería Perchita. Perchita ante Lechuga. Le pega Perchita. ¡Lo ha parado! Con suspense, con incertidumbre, pero acabó sacando finalmente. Pues venga, todo tuyo. Ahí está, algo bajito, capo. Verdú. Contacto con la pelota en el carril central, abre precisamente para Vives. El centro acaba siendo portería, porque evitaron que el pase de la muerte pudiese llegar. Pero si eres de Barcelona y quieres vivir la emoción de la última jornada en el Cupra Arena de tanto la Kings League InfoJobs como de la Queens League, puedes entrar también en el centro y el remate. Ahora te lo cuento porque es un golazo. ¡Gol! De Frankie Purtí. Irá Frankie para darle la vuelta al Rayo. Frankie lo ha parado. Lo ha parado Manu Martín. En la porfía con Ian, en todo caso no se aplica nada y viene el ataque ahora de los troncos. ¡Lechuga! Román Alegre está bien, gol doble.
Gol doble para Rayo.
Sí. El capitán de los troncos combina con Vives. ¡Lechuga! Era muy difícil porque le botó justo en el momento. Un penalti shootout. Tanto sonoras como lumínicas del Cupra Arena. Sorroche para el tercero. ¡Lechuga! Decide combinar sobre Paul Román. Aparece Román Alegre que filtra el envío. El remate para adentro. ¡Gol de oro! ¡Cántalo! ¡Gol! ¡Gol! Del Rayo de Barcelona. Llegar y besar el santo Joel Paredes.
Frankie Purtí, Prime MVP, por fin ha llegado esa victoria tan esperada para el Rayo.
Sí, ha costado mucho. La verdad que aquí ganar cuesta muchísimo y hay que valorarlo mucho. Y como ha dicho el míster, al final hoy era un partido amistoso que encarábamos como preparación para el partido donde nos jugamos la vida, que es el partido de play-out del Mundial. Y esperemos que esto nos sirva para encarar una buena dinámica y encarar ese partido de la mejor manera posible.
Hoy no ha podido estar el Presi, no sé si nos estará viendo desde casa y no sé si le quieres decir algo.
Yo creo que sí nos estará viendo. Le mando un fuerte abrazo. Esta semana ha sido una semana difícil para él y espero que le anime, tanto la victoria del femenino como la nuestra este fin de semana. Espero que le anime y que le ayude a pasar la semana de la mejor manera posible y decirle que le queremos mucho y que vamos a dar la vida para que el Rayo esté en el Mundial.
Ojalá que así sea. Enhorabuena. Gracias.